Dear brothers and sisters, welcome to the studio of the Sabbath School Department by the General Conference. Once again, we're here to present you the new Sabbath School lesson. We are studying this historical Sabbath School lessons of Pastor Kramer, and they're related to the experience of the Adventists in the First World War. That's why we have these black and white pictures in the background, and we're together with our dear sister Raquel. Or say, welcome Raquel. Condition of the many. These Sabbath School lessons will deal with the opinion of the majority and how we're supposed to react and to be related to this opinion. But before we begin to study our lessons in details, we wish to have a silent prayer. Amen. As usual, we will go through the structure of the lesson, and here is our Sabbath School lesson. We have 10 questions, a long lesson, but this time the lesson is not so heavy, and we can go faster through the different questions, so the time will surely be enough for the class. The first under the title is Introduction, General State of Society. Analyze a little bit the situation of the society in the world. Some of the Bible verses can be related not only to the worldly society, but only to the society in the church. And we need to see how that is related and what kind of teaching we can get out of it. The next undertitle is Cause of Overwhelming Iniquity. It is the escalation of the topic. We're going to see that the majority, the vast majority in the society is not only against God or have different opinion than what God's have, but actually it is overwhelming iniquity, and we're going to see on this undertitle how actually the world is departed from the will of God. Other preparation of masses of people, or representation, other representation of masses of people. It's a continuation of the very same thought. And then we have the remnant will be saved, is actually the central point of the lesson, and let's begin with question number 7. How actually in the Noah's days and the time of difficulties the people of God have been tested, and then they have to always to combat against the opinion of the majority. And remember that this lesson has to do with our historical a very specific historical event, which is the First World War, and was repeated and magnified actually at the time of the Second World War. The same experience with the same difficulties and even much bigger persecution and troubles. And it will be repeated also in the time when the Sunday law comes, or the persecution about our faith in any country, in any place. This is the case. Another in the title, The Straight Way, is actually a continuation of the thoughts about the remnant, but here we are reminded that there is a narrow path, and the difference between the narrow and the wide way. So this is the lesson. It's very important that we use the last questions 9 and 10 to appeal to our audience that they do take stand for the narrow path, and that they take stand against the influence of the world and against the society, whatever society we're moving in. It's a society of friends, society of co-workers, society of relatives, society of so many circles of relationship we have in the world. But now we would love to move back to our detailed study, question by questions, and here we have our dear sister Raquel. We can discuss several points. and stop actually point by point to analyze the lesson. This time we don't have a PowerPoint or another graphic separation or detailed study on the questions, because they are very clearly expressed by the Bible verses and the testimonies. The first question, Raquel, who is leading the majority of people on earth, and how do you know? I think it's a question not only in the Sabbath school lesson. This is a question that appear very much in the media in the world. You can see that in YouTube and different other places. A lot of people are writing in that direction, but what actually the Bible says in the testimony.
It's very interesting because both Bible texts help us to find the answer to the question. The first element that we need to consider clearly is to understand the condition of our planet. And it's no doubt, no matter with whom you speak, everybody will confirm that the condition that we are in society, in nature, environmental, political world, is in a very distressed and troubled situation. The Bible text in Ephesians 2 and 3 explain to us the main reasons and origin of the condition of the people on earth. And according to this, is because the majority follow what the Bible text says, the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. So we see here that is a power, and it's a power related with disobedience, related with lust, with evil desires, with desires of the flesh and the mind, and all these evil characteristics and attributes are related with Satan. And the Bible presented as the prince of the power of the air and also the spirit of disobedience. So again, we can have the confirmation that on this earth are only two powers, good and evil. And unfortunately, the majority of the people on earth follow the power that is in direct opposition to the power of God, that is the good and the mercy and the justice and the one that give life and maintain the life on this earth. So the general state of society is an evil one, a terrible one, under the power of the enemy of good, that is Satan. And how we know that? We know that because of the effects, the consequences, the present situation that we are in, especially if we consider how humans have destroyed this planet, how the tension in social levels of society are, how people are dying from hunger, how people are dying because of so many wars going on now on this earth. So these elements show us which are the main tendency and which are the main power that impulse all these terrible situations, and unfortunately is the evil spirit.
Thank you very much. Here is the testimony, says that if numbers were the evidences of success, Satan may claim the preeminence, for in this world his followers are largely in the majority. So we see that actually people follow the power, as the Bible verse says, and we know where the power is. By the kings of the world, there is the power, and that's why the three unclean spirit goes to the kings of the earth, and the political machinery or power around the world is the one that have the biggest influence upon the people, and that's why people follow all these kind of elements, all these kind of orders. And we see that the larger majority in earth, all the events, historical events, are more evil than good. That is evidently the leadership of the negative power in this world. But let's continue to the second question. What is the general condition of society today? It's actually very similar questions to number one, and it could be combined also when you as teachers, pastors are guiding the lesson. You can do that. But what is the general condition of society? How this apostasy, or how this Satan worship or power worship world actually is represented or reflected in the daily life?
The first question presented us as the preeminence of evil on this world. The second one explained to us the attitude that the human beings have toward the situation, and also what kind of powers the majority choose. According to this Bible text from Romans chapter 3, we can understand very clearly that there is no one righteous, no one that understands, no one that seek after God. And it's very interesting that these three elements are very important to consider. So the first one has to do with doing the deeds that we perform. So it's no one that is righteous, no one that from alone do good. The second element is no one that understands also the power of the mind. So if we have considered the deeds that everyone does is not good. The second that has to do with the power of our mind, the process of thinking and then take the decision to do things, is also not right. The principles are not the correct ones. And the third element is no one that seek after God. So no interest for God, not interest for good, for the right things, for the good principles, for these that are fair and justice, no interest at all. So in the deeds, in the thoughts, and the interest of the majority of the people is also not a tendency for good. But even if this is individually to be considered, the second part of the Bible text emphasizes very clear than the majority. Because first says non-righteous, non-understanding, and non-seeking God. And now we are all gone out of the way, all together become unprofitable, and then again came with the conclusion, no one doth good, not one. So it's very interesting that every single one who don't have interest, don't do good, don't think good. And the majority, all of them together, follow a wrong path. They went out of the way, are not in the way to heaven. And it's very clear and very, very sad to confirm that the Bible text say they are together become unprofitable. This is a very, very sad statement. So worthy for nothing. Nothing can be done with this kind of people because it's unprofitable. This condition is the condition of the human beings, the society as general. Now, please don't try to isolate yourself from this situation and try to consider how is your way of thinking, how is your way of doing things, and how is your interest to seek for God. If we don't fulfill these three main principles, for sure, we will be unprofitable and out of the way. So the first and the second question try to explain to us that the reason why the humanity achieved the condition that we are in is not by chance, is a process, is a choice, is a decision.
Thank you very much. When we're talking about iniquity, about a society, we are very much tempted to apply that only to the world and to the worldly society. But actually when Apostle Paul speaks, he says there is no one. That includes the religious societies, that includes the church as well. And coming back to the historical background of this Sabbath school lessons, we need to understand that in time of crisis, actually surprisingly big number of church members are taking wrong position. And that case was the Seventh Adventist Church. The majority was taking totally under the influence of the world. So the people or the faithful ones, they needed to be watchful, not just because of the influence of the world, but they needed to be watchful also if the church really is doing the right things or not. But we're going to see this a little later in our Sabbath school lesson. What is the cause of so much suffering in the world? We go to that under title to see in continuation. Now the lesson speaks more about the things in the world. Now since there is so much iniquity in the world, which is the consequences? Many times people say, why is there so much suffering around the world? Why God permit all these immigrants to suffer and die and be killed, and why so many wars around the world and all this violence and criminalities? And what is the answer? Here we have in our lesson a good answer. Isaiah the prophet says, and also the testimony. What would you say, Raquel?
Yes, the Bible text presents us different concepts that we need to understand clearly. We speak about laws, ordinances, and covenant. And it's clear, the introductory part of the Bible text that says the earth also is divided under the inhabitants thereof. So the earth, the planet, is contaminated, not because the planet as such is contaminated, but the human beings have done what we have now. And now, first reason, they have transgressed the laws. Second, they have changed the ordinances. And third, broken the everlasting covenant. These three concepts, laws, ordinances, and covenant, are very important elements that regulated all the system in our planet and also the relationship among human beings. Let us consider the first one, because they have transgressed the laws. Under laws, in this case, we find all the social regulations and the principles that included the natural laws in this planet. And all these physical laws are transgressed one after the other until the point that even the balance of this planet is in grievous danger in the present time. The second element, say, change the ordinances. This have to do with also the natural laws, but related specifically between the relation among human beings. And we know how differences these ordinances are. For example, the gap between poor and rich is increasing tremendously. The difference between the races, between the underdevelopment countries and the developing countries is increased also very, very quickly. Also the isolation from all of them that live in misery, poverty and disgrace is even bigger. So this has to do with this element here. And the third one is the everlasting covenant. This has to do with the 10 commandments, with the main principles of the character of God. So when natural laws, social laws, and healthy laws, and the law of God is completely erased, completely disregarded, is no hope for existence in peace in this world. It's absolutely impossible, because the principles that maintain the existence and guarantee for the life and harmony on this planet is completely disregarded. And this is the reason why desolation, misery, war, and destruction is all over.
Thank you very much. I would like to address a little bit the attention in the second sentence of the verse 6. Actually, therefore had the curse devoured the earth. And that is something that people usually don't think that it's happening. When we do evil, there is a curse that follows up. The consequences of our sin have tremendous impact and influence to others. It's the same in a family. If one of the partner of the family is unfaithful and the other know that, immediately this is a curse, or this is a possibility that the other get also or become unfaithful to the first one. Then both are unfaithful. Then the bigger are the consequences. Finally, the whole family falls apart. Even worse consequences. And same thing is in the society. When in the war, there are two countries in relationship, and their relationship getting worse and worse until things comes into a war. Then other countries getting in, and other countries getting in, and that's how the First World War began. Actually, today, from historical point of view, that was a tremendous mistake, and it could be avoided easily by little more wisdom on the part of the leaders and politicians at that time. But it's always easy to think after the things have happened and to find the errors and mistakes. What we can do today is to watch our own steps, not to fall into temptation, not to transgress the law of God, not to break His covenant. Question number 4 says, what does sin have, or why does, sin have such a power over all humanity? It's another very logical question. If evil is so bad and there's such a bad consequences and everybody can see them, why the people are continuing doing it?
This is a personal choice, and we see here that this is not only a personal choice but also a corporative choice. And unfortunately, we need to confirm that the majority of the population of this world choose to follow a spirit that is against God and follow Satan in order to be free from the law of God, in order to be free from the submission to the principles of heaven, and to follow then also the commandments of God. So why does sin have such power about all humanity? Because we decided so. And this is the problem. Nobody, no human being, not even Satan and his angels can compel anybody to sin. Every time that we decided something and we do something is our own decision. This can be for good or for evil. For sure, we have a tendency. We can have weaknesses in ourselves for specific things that are not good. Even the way how we were educated, the social pressure, the environment where we are in. This have also an influence to lead us in one or other direction, but at the end, every single one take the decision, for good or for evil. And therefore it's so important that, especially in the case of the people of God, in the subject that we are studying, revival and reformation, especially when the people of God were confronted with the beginning of the First World War, that was a decision to be taken, to be in harmony with God or with the authorities, to follow the principles of heaven or the principles of the earth government. And again, the majority follow what the decision contradict heavenly principles. So always is a personal choice. Therefore, when we have knowledge and we are presenting this lesson for our people and the members of our church, we have knowledge. We have enough information to do and to take right choices. May the Lord help us to avoid to take decision according to our own wrong inclinations, according to our own preferences, if they are in contradiction to the principles of heaven.
Thank you very much. Actually, the testimony clarified very nicely this problem that the humanity have. It says, fallen man is Satan's lawful captive. So many people that participate in war, they acknowledge that the war is terrible, it's satanic. I mean, not only church members were pacifists and rejected the combatant status. They have been people that were not members, they were not even Adventists. Especially the First World War, we have about 15 New Zealand soldiers that rejected weapon, and then they were very strict and non-combatant in a non-combatant position. So the mind of the man understand what's right and what's wrong, especially if the Spirit of God is with us. He can enlighten our mind and we can see what is right, what's wrong. But the difference is that the people in the world, the people that doesn't have Christ, they have no power for performance of the good. And that is the second sentence in the testimony. It says, the mission of Jesus Christ was to rescue him from his power. The man be rescued. The only rescue and possibility that we have, that power of resistance against the power, the influence of the world, is in Jesus Christ. He's the only one that can liberate us. But continuing in the next questions, we're going to see that with what is this widespread condition compared. Let's see, now the faithful ones, the remnant, is the only one that prove that Christ have rescued them, because they're the only one that they don't care death, they don't care consequences, they want to be faithful to the principles of God. And we see that a majority in the world, the majority even of the church, they appear in that time of crisis without power of resisting the evil, without the power of Christ. It's such a sad condition. I hope that if the crisis come today, that our brothers and sisters and our members will have that resisting power against the influence of the world, against the influence and the power of the world. And sometimes small indications show us how big is our resistance. If we have to face difficulties and we have to compromise our faith in order to obtain some advantages of the world, if that is money or positions or employment or whatsoever, then we can see the same temptation, the same terrible attraction of transgressing the commandments and compromise the will of God just to obtain certain advantages. And that's exactly what, where the church failed on that time. Question number five says, with what is this widespread condition compared?
According to the Bible text, is compared with darkness. And we know that God is light and is no darkness in him. So darkness is related with sin, with evil, and with wrongdoing. And the Bible text, both of them, Isaiah and John, explain to us that the combination between light and darkness is not possible. According to a biblical perspective, the gray zones don't exist. It's only light and darkness. All what we can understand under shadows or gray areas are this condition that describe very well the Laodicean church. This is lukewarmness, and also the Lord deplored this kind of condition and rejected completely. So we see here that we cannot be in between. We need to take a decision, and this is the principle of revival and reformation. And let us be under the light. Let us follow the light. Let us choose God that illuminate our lives, our hearts, our minds, and go away and eliminate any darkness of our life, so that we don't love the darkness, because cover any kind of sins, mistakes that we do. But let us receive this light so that we can be transparent, that we can see and show us as we are in Jesus Christ, that through him the deeds of evil will disappear from us.
Thank you very much. The picture we have in the back is a black and white picture. But if you can notice, the biggest portion of every black and white picture actually is not black and white, but is the gray mixture between the white and black. And that's what is happening in the world, and especially in the religious world. We're tending very much to stay in a gray area, which means little evil and little good, little from God and little from the enemy. And that is a kind of mixture that does not represent actually the true religiosity. If we are very, very dedicated to God, as the pioneers were, then we will reject the darkness. When light comes, the darkness disappears. It's like oil and water. It doesn't mix together. It cannot have a chemical reaction. And if we still have this possibility of chemical reaction or mingle with the evil, it's because we're still too far from Christ. The Spirit of God have not taken complete possession in our hearts. And that's very, very important. These questions 5 actually have to do with this gray area. If you're driving in the road and you see the yellow light, most of the time we push the pedal and try to pass through. But if that traffic light symbolizes sin, we better put in the brakes and we stop. Because if we pass on red, if we transgress the law of God, that symbolizes, that is already a death. And if Jesus Christ does not intercede for us, we actually literally have to die. And sin is like death, and many people have fear of death, but they don't fear the sin, they don't fear God. And it's exactly the opposite. If we fear God, we don't need to fear death, because death have no power over us. And that's what happened with the pioneers. They didn't fear death, they fear God. But the rest of the people and in the world, they fear death, and they transgress the commandments of the Lord. Question number 6 says, what other symbol illustrates the power controlling multitudes, nations, and people?
we find in Revelation 17 the presentation between the religious powers and the government powers in combination. So we find here this woman with very strange apparel, and this woman is a symbol of a fallen church, and this is the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, together with the kings of the earth, with the government. So the connection between religion and politics and state power, and at the same time the influence of the doctrine, because it's presented with this wine of fornication, and everybody, all the inhabitants of the earth, have been made drunk, together also with the kings of the earth. So we see here that without difference, the majority of the inhabitants of the earth, peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues, have taken the wrong understanding about God, accepted wrong doctrines, the body of doctrine, the presentation of the truth, that this power, the Catholic Church, have widespread in all the continents as a religious power, and also as an intermediator with the political powers, have contaminated this world with evil, falsehood, and unrighteousness.
Thank you very much. It's interesting. This lesson connect again with the prophecy, something we studied in the previous series of Sabbath school lessons. And if you have not been able to study them because you're a new member, or you have not yet found these lessons, you can find these lessons in my YouTube channel and just study them. It's very, very important, Revelation chapter 17. But here says that they drank of the wine of fornication. So this kind of sin which is committed in such a time, it's called also a fornication, a spiritual fornication. When a person believes in God, when he have his moral principles, but he decide not to follow them, he decide to transgress them, to compromise them, it is a similar experience like a fornication, to go and, especially in the size of the women, to render under another power, render under another spirit, to be possessed, to be overcome by the another power, by the, if that is a political power of the government, if that is the love of money, if that is the love of power and positions, everything is related to this similarity of fornication, a spiritual adultery and fornication. But we're going to see now that not everybody was running into this wine of fornication. Nobody was drunk of this wine of fornication. And one more thought about the wine. Actually, the wine is an alcoholic drink. And the alcoholic drink is actually changing your mind, disconnect your ability to think. And if you think that all evil that humans have committed through the First and much more the Second World War, with this we can say destruction and a Holocaust that have happened against gypsies and Jewish and free-thinking people and religious people, and the people agree with that. And just a couple years later, when everything broke in pieces, people were actually thinking, how could we agree with that? How could we, why we didn't do anything to stop that? It is like to be drunk with the wine. It is the mind of the people changed completely. They are possessed by that worldly and that terrible satanic spirit. But not everybody is possessed. And now we come to the remnant. There is a remnant that is under the control of the Spirit. There is always Cedras, Meshach, and Abednego. There is David, there is Daniel, and present time. And who are these people, and what calamity befell the people on earth in Noah's days? Let's begin with the Noah's days. What happened?
Yeah, Jesus Christ used the similitude of the condition in the times of Noah with the condition of the society when Jesus will come the second time. And Genesis 6 explains us short but very concentrated how the situation was. The first thing that we find is that God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth. So God observed what is going on. God have created human beings with a free will. So He bestowed all these wonderful blessings and give to us all these wonderful things in this earth. But He expects that we appreciated that we live accordingly. But unfortunately it's not the case. So God considered how is the general condition of the earth. And the first confirmation thus say to us that the wickedness was great. So very, very high level of wickedness. The second element that is also mentioned is that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So we find here some specific elements that help us to understand how deep in sin the inhabitants in the time of Noah were. So we see here every single thought, so every imagination of the thoughts was only evil. So no one good thought. And this happened on a daily basis, continually, without exception. So we see that the general condition was extremely wicked. Also the individual persons have only thinking and doing evil continually. More than that, then is explaining to us that the earth was corrupted before God. So this has to do with the environment and the nature and the general structural physical laws that God has established for the good functioning of this planet. So they were destroyed, corrupted, distortionated, even more than that. And the earth was filled with violence. So a continually form of war, enmity, hostility. Violence was something common. But even more than that, when the Lord considered all this, He decided is no more possible. The measure of the mercy of God came to an end. So we see here that environmental and physical elements of the earth were corrupted. The general tendency of the society was to do evil continually. And even the relationship between humans were completely violent and evil also. So in these three levels, personal relationship with the environment, and condition of the general population, are completely corrupted. And unfortunately, we need to confirm that this what happened during Noah's day is a reality today.
Thank you very much. Very interesting is the parallel in Noah's time and today days. Jesus Christ make comparison or he remind us related to the end of time, and he says it will be like the time of Noah. So we can actually identify our time and the spirit of the world today with the one in the time of Noah. And the strange parallel is that in a very similar way, a very little minority were the people able to resist on that terrible, violent, and powerful position of the world. And it is also in a similar way how that happened during the First World War. Only a little minority were able to think freely, to be really free by Jesus Christ, and to have the power of the Holy Spirit to resist. The question number 8 says, even if God professed church numbered in the millions today, only what portion will be saved and why? And now that is very, very important question. And Romans chapter 9 speaks about that, and we have 2 wonderful testimonies.
The present society have a tendency to gather quantity. This can be quantity of goods, quantity of money, quantity of people. And this desire to possess the most, to have the most, no matter the value of it, is only the fact that have the most, is contrary to the principles of heaven. The Lord not want to have quantity only to have it. This is not the point. The point is the principles that belong to these people, that qualify these persons. And the Bible text is very clear and say to us, though the number of the children of Israel be as the sand of the sea, a remnant shall be saved. So even when is a great number, the one that profess to be followers of God, when tribulations, when problems, when the time of probation will come, only few, small group, a remnant, will remain. And this is an element that we need to consider, because in the time of trial is the moment that our good or evil way of doing things are revealed the most, because we need to decide it according to our general behavior that we have followed in the past. And this is the reason why when the trial comes, it's not a time of change. It's not a time of transition. The trial comes and decisions need to be taken. And the ones that are used to choose the wrong things, that don't live according to the principles of heaven, automatically will take the decision against the principles of heaven, even if they have professed until this time the opposite. So may the Lord help us to understand that the quality is appreciated for heaven, how we interiorize the principles of heaven, and how far the light of heaven illuminate our life will take the last decision in our lives.
Thank you very much. I would like to point the attention of our audience here to the testimony, Message to the Young People, page 374. It's interesting that this message was given to the young people, and I hope that more young people will listen and follow these Sabbath school lessons also. It says the majority of the nominal Christians, while they profess to be living for Christ, are really living for the world. And that is very sad conclusion which the prophet is making. And if we consider, let's put the screen so you can see the testimony. That's the first two lines here. If you could see, there is so much tension in the world, and this is such a terrible deception, self-deception, and deception of the entire world. When people believe, or they think, they hope that they are living for Christ, and in reality, the report of the Lord is totally different. But let's continue now to the next question, question number 9. When it comes to matter of faith and truth, in what can no trust be placed, and why? When it comes to matter of truth, what are we supposed to do when it's questions of truth, Raquel?
The Bible texts are very clear. Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil. Where shall those speak in a cause to decline after many to rest judgment? So majority is not orientation. Majority don't have the right to influence our decisions, but principles of heaven. But unfortunately, our present society follow the majority. What the television say, what the movie shows, what the celebrities does. This is what produce a trend where everybody wins, where the majority go, and the multitudes do evil. We have studied the first and the second question, and because we have the privilege to know the truth, how is possible that still we are following the multitude in doing evil? May the Lord forgive us, and may the Lord help us, because never ever that was our orientation possibility. Even when Jesus was on this earth, he was alone. He was with a very small group of people following what his Father teach him to do. And according to 1 Corinthians 1:19 and 20, say very clearly that the wisdom that this world have is nothing in comparison with the principles of heaven. Why we disregard the principles of heaven? While we didn't consider precious and beautiful and wonderful this truth that the Lord have entrusted to us. May this lesson help us to have a more deep understanding about our position, our choices, and our doing.
Thank you very much. It's interesting. The question speaks about those who are the remnants. And let's consider a little bit of the testimony here, which it says the multitudes do not want Bible truth because it interferes with the desire of the sinful, world-living heart. It's incredible clear, this testimony, and continue. And Satan supplies the deceptions which they love. Many times we as Christians, we consider that, well, we can fall in sin and we are weak, and many times temptation overcomes us. But there is very important understanding of the truth in this lesson, and especially considering the history of Adventism, that there is a test and point in which, if we do not take a right stand, if we let it go, and if we go in the wrong side, we can really lose our salvation. We can really depart of the side of God. We can be taken totally in the wrong way. And that's why it's so important that we really understand the truth, that we follow the truth in the simplicity in every single and small point that appears today. And that is actually also the next question, Tain. How is the way of salvation presented in the Bible, and how many will walk that way, the narrow path? How many will walk in that way, Raquel?
This Bible text is described as this way, the way of salvation. First of all, says that it's straight. Second is narrow, and at the same time is explained to us that few are the ones that find it and are willing to go on this way, and therefore is presented to us the way of life and the way of death. The Lord have done that before the people of God came into Canaan, and the Lord is presented to us today also before we go to our heavenly Canaan. So consider, please, and take a very deep decision so that a revival and a reformation take place in every one of us individually, so that this can have also a corporative influence in our lives, to choose the straight way, to choose the narrow way, and to choose the way of life.
Thank you very much, Raquel, for your comments. Actually, brothers and sisters, we need to make clear that if there is a person who is already in the Sabbath school class, it means that he is on the way and the narrow path. He wants to learn the narrow path. He wants to learn the way of God, and that's already a sign that God loves him, that God have guided him to that narrow path. And not only him, but perhaps relatives, family members, and everybody else that is surrounding him. So it's very important that we make clear that it's not just, this message is not just negative. Let's not focus on the minority walking into the narrow path and the majority walking in the wide way of darkness and the road going to death. But let's focus also in the message full of hope, that if God have put a little interest to the truth today, it's because he wants us to be part of his people, no matter how many they are, no matter how many they will be. I and you and each one of us, we are invited by God to be part of this narrow path. Dear brothers and sisters, may the Lord bless you, that we all can participate in this revival and reformation, and with the help of the Lord, we can see each other the next week. God bless you.